nice, moderately warm, rain. Man, you could really get into the day if you trusted in the Lord. A beautiful day. We're going to find ourselves in the book of Ecclesiastes in our series. This morning's message will be centered around, are we only dust in the wind? Are we only dust in the wind? There's a famous group by the name of Kansas that sung a tremendous song. I sent it to my son last night around 10 o'clock. And it's called Dust in the Wind. Are we only dust in the wind? Some of you remember that song. We're going to find ourselves in the first chapter of Ecclesiastes again. Do you recall they used to have this program called The Wide, Wide World of Sports? And it dealt with all kinds of sporting events and activities. And one of the key things in there that always would get me, it says the agony, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Thinking about the last Super Bowl as I was looking at this message, and I thought about an interview that Tom Brady had. He had won 3 Super Bowls at that time, and he had some disappointing things in his life. He was dating one girl and had a baby with another, and just all kind of turmoil was going on. And he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he was asked the question on the interview on 60 Minutes, and he asked him, how do you feel about the fact that you've been in 3 Super Bowls, you've won 3 of them, and this is very, very important to you, how significant it is. And Tom sort of sat back and he said to him, even though I've won 3 Super Bowls, and it's been fun, it's not all cracked up to what I thought it would be. That's why into that thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Oftentimes we find ourselves in life wishing that we knew and understood, and that we had a relatively clear view of life and understanding of life. And that's why this book that we're in now, Ecclesiastes, is so important, because Ecclesiastes is a book of life. Remember I told you when I was sharing with this young lady when we were in college, this book of Ecclesiastes, and we were trying to figure out whether it was a doom and gloom book or whether it was a book of life, and finally we came to the conclusion that it's a book of life. See, the book of Ecclesiastes centers around the topic of life. As a matter of fact, Solomon in this book talks about life almost more than anything else. And that's why we can say that it's not a morbid book. It's a book about life, and I always tell you, to understand something, you need to see how it began from the beginning, not just look at the end. And Solomon does something, as we discussed last time, that most people don't do. He tells you the essence of what he's dealing with. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2 again. He sort of tells us that, as we talked about the last time, that it has to be more to life than this endless circle. More to life than the monotonous circle of going from one end to the other, going from distance to distance and not getting anywhere. And he tells us this, and look what he says to us in Ecclesiastes 1 and 2. He says, vanity of vanities, said the preacher, vanities of vanities, all is vanity. And what he's telling us is that we have to be very conscious of this rat race, that we don't get on this maze of constantly just going in a vicious cycle and going nowhere. And what he's telling us is that how can we look at this? How can we come to understand the totality of our existence, the totality of our being? What's important in our lives? What's our purpose in life outside of self? And he tells us that it is that life without God is nothing but a dead-end street. Life without God is going to take us nowhere. He tells us in his book of Ecclesiastes, which is sort of his diary or his journal that he has, he tries to let us see that without God, there's no happiness. Without God, there's no joy. Without God, there's no fulfillment. Without God, there's no satisfaction in life on this earth. Without God, there's nothing to it. Because he tells us that there's nothing under the sun that is more important than our relationship with God. So Solomon sort of takes the book of Ecclesiastes like a giant laboratory, as he's explaining to us. He's going into the theories of life and what's life without God being a significant part of it. And he spends a whole lot of time sort of dealing with it, because there are people in our lives, in our country, in our state, who believe that if they could just smoke, they'll be okay. If they could just shoot a gun, they will be okay. If they could just find love, they'll be okay. If they could just spend more, they will be okay. If they could just find happiness and satisfaction, they'll be okay. And what Solomon sort of does in the book of Ecclesiastes, he tells us is that we're focused on the wrong things. We're focused on the wrong things. And what I want you to walk away from this morning is this. Our key takeaway is this. Every street to satisfaction without God is a dead-end street. I'll say it again. Every street that you and I choose to go down without God is a dead-end street. And Solomon is telling us here is that he has tried every street. He's tried the street of satisfaction. He's gone down that highway. He's gone down the highway of happiness. He's going down the highway of peace. And what he finds is that all of these things end up being empty and not fulfilling. And so what he's telling you and I is that if we're going to have a fulfilling life, that we need to pick the right street to go down. Because oftentimes we pick the wrong avenue. And when we pick the wrong avenue, we're going to end up at a dead end. Now, why is this so important? If Solomon was the richest, wisest man in the history of the world, and he tells you and me that all is vanity, he's telling us something that's critically important, because he's telling us that I've tried all these streets. If you go down this one, you think you're satisfied, you're not satisfied. If you go down this one, you think you're satisfied, you're not satisfied. If you go down this one, you think you're satisfied, you're not satisfied. You go down this one for joy. Now, and he's telling us is that there's no satisfaction without God. And he breaks it down into 4 key categories that all of us deal with. Solomon tells us that when we try to go down the street of intellectual satisfaction, we're going to find that unfulfilling. He said when we start to look for happiness in intellectual capacity, we're going to find even that intellectual approach doesn't bring up happiness. There are people who have said, if I could just get a college degree, I'll be all right. There are people who say, if I could just get my PhD degree, I'll be all right. If I could just get my master's, I'll be all right. If I could just graduate. Remember there was a time when you said, man, if I could just make sure I get out of the 7th grade and go to high school, I'll be all right. Solomon is telling us is that sometimes even exploring intellectual capacity is not going to bring us to where we need to be. Look what he tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. He says to you and I, look, I tried all of the philosophy in the world. I tried all the psychology in the world. I tried all the sociology. I tried all the history. I tried logic. I tried science. I tried all of these things that the human mind can conceive and come up with. I tried. Look what he tells us. Ecclesiastes 1 and 12 and 13. I, the preacher, watch this, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. Watch. Pay attention to this. And I set my mind to seek and explore wisdom concerning all things. Now, when you seek something out, you're trying to find it. When you're exploring something, you're trying to discover it. So what Solomon says to you and I set my mind to seek and explore wisdom concerning not one thing, but all things. So that means he had to read a lot of scrolls, a lot of books, have philosophers, have mathematicians, have all the scientists, have the people like the Magi. He had all kinds of people bringing him knowledge and information. And look what he says. That has been done under heaven. And look what he says to you and I, a key word. It is a grievous task which God has given to the Son of Man to be afflicted with. Look at the essence of that. Solomon is saying to you and I became so obsessed with knowledge and intellectual capacity that it started to afflict me. I became so obsessed with knowledge and capacity that it started to grieve me. That which I sought, that which I desired, instead of becoming joy and peace in my life, became a burden on me. Have you ever dreamed that intellectual growth and capacity can become a burden on you? Solomon said, I sought these things out. And he said, I examined everything extensively. And as I examined all these things, it became grievous to me. It became a burden to me. So Solomon is saying to you and I, you're not going to find happiness and joy and peace in intellectual capacity. Isn't that amazing? The wealthiest, wisest man in the world says to you and I, don't go down that road. Because when you go down that road, it's going to be a dead end. He's saying to you and I, don't go down that road. Look at Ecclesiastes 1:16. He's saying it's not going to be, you're not going to have success there. He says because anything under the sun is under heaven. Look what he says. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all, not some, more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed the wealth of wisdom and knowledge. So he became the wisest man in the world. And then when he found out, when he became the wisest man in the world, he found out that even his knowledge didn't satisfy him. Look at 1 Kings 4:29. And he's saying to you and I, look he tells us in 1 Kings. He said, now God gave Solomon wisdom and very great discernment and breadth of mind like the sands of the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the sons of the earth and all the wisdom of Egypt. So all the knowledge, all the understanding, all is in the world, Solomon's wisdom surpassed it all. And it tells us that kings and people came from all over the world to share information with Solomon. As a matter of fact, Solomon was a know-it-all. He knew everything. And even a know-it-all who knows everything tells you and I became afflicted by it. It was grievous to me. He's saying that it didn't matter. He says in Ecclesiastes 1:17, I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. Now watch this. And I realized that this also is striving after wind. So all of the knowledge, all of the wisdom, he tells us in Ecclesiastes 1:7, is just striving after the wind. He tells us because in such wisdom, watch this. Solomon is saying to you and I, once I gathered this wisdom, once I gathered this knowledge, once I put all of this together, it didn't matter. Watch what he tells us. And I want you to see the essence of it. He said, I set my mind, Ecclesiastes 1:17. Let's unpack this verse. Let's unpack this verse. He said, I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I realized that this also was striving after the wind. Because in much wisdom, watch this, in much wisdom, there's much grief. And in increasing knowledge, there's increasing pain. Solomon said, the more knowledge that I gain, the more wisdom that I gain, the more pain that I suffer. I gained so much knowledge and I gained so much wisdom. And I had so much discernment. I could see things before they happen. I could discern. But I was powerless to do anything about it. He said all this wisdom and all this knowledge, look what he says. He says, I set my mind to know wisdom and knowledge and madness and folly. And I realized that this also is striving after the wind. Because in much wisdom, there's much grief. And increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. The more knowledge he got, the more wisdom he got, the more pain. Because he became helpless to do anything with it. And that's why he's telling you and I that knowledge can answer questions of time, but knowledge can't answer questions of eternity. He's telling you and I, you're going to always get back to the same point. No matter how much knowledge you get, no matter how much wisdom you get, you're going to always get back to this. When I die, what happens to me? He's saying there's no salvation in knowledge and wisdom. Because if you just seek out knowledge and wisdom for pure knowledge and wisdom's sake, in the absence of Christ being the center of your life, that's a dead end street. Ask yourself how many people have gone down that street and come to the realization, I'm lost. I got all this knowledge. I got all this wisdom. Nothing I can do with it. I'm in so much pain. I'm in so much suffering. Because I can see 20 miles down the road that this is going to happen. But I'm powerless to influence. I'm powerless to change it. With wisdom, Solomon says, comes sorrow. He's telling you and I that wisdom and knowledge without God is a dead end street. It's foolishness. It's foolishness. And so Solomon addresses that directly for us. And the second thing Solomon tries to tell us is that if you're only about yourself, if you're only about pleasure, that's going to bring you to a dead end street. Look what he tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. He said, if you're a party-hardy kind of guy, if everything in your life is about party and party-hardy, if you're a party-hardy kind of guy, if you're a party-hardy kind of guy, if everything in your life is about a party, if everything in your life is about just having fun, if everything in your life is just about having fun, what he's saying to you and I in Ecclesiastes 2:1, he said, I said to myself, come, let us try pleasure. Come, let us try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. So there's a whole group of people that say to themselves, hey, I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to be a party-hardy kind of guy. I'm going to jam. I'm going to let loose. I'm just going to let myself feel good. Their motto is, I'm going to party hardy. And Solomon says to you and I, if we make that choice, that's a dead end street. If we make that choice, that's a dead end street. You see, Solomon says to you and I, in the book of Ecclesiastes 2:1-3, he said he did what most people do. He took his palace in Jerusalem, and every week he turned it into a party-hardy city. If you wanted to have a party, if you wanted to have fun, Solomon says, look, this is what I did. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 and 3. Look what he says. If you're a party kind of guy, you're going to still end up on that dead end street. If your life is just a pursuit of pleasure, listen to what I'm telling you. If your life is just centered around the pursuit of pleasure, if your life is only centered around how much fun you can have, that's a dead end street. Look what he says to us. I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. but I found this too was meaningless. So I said, laughter is silly. What good does it do to seek pleasure? And after much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. We do the same thing. See, Solomon is laying down here for us the process, the protocol. He says, I decided to cheer myself with wine, and while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness in my heart, and I tried to experience only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. So he centered all of his life around the pleasures. And he was saying to you and I, if our life is just about pleasure, if our life isn't focused on God in any way, that is going to be a dead-end street. He's telling you and I that you can experiment with alcohol. You can experiment with mind-altering drugs, uppers and downers and pills, all kind of powders, all kind of crystals, all kind of pain pills that you can find in any drugstore or any corner. He said you can try all these things to try to find pleasure. But all that's going to do is bring you down a dead-end street. He said you can do all this. He said, matter of fact, you can find pleasure in sports. You can find pleasure in bingo. You can find pleasure in the movies. You can make all of these things important in your life. You can find pleasure just watching your favorite TV shows. And all of these things that you're trying to find pleasure in is going to lead you down a dead-end street in the absence of God in your life. And he's telling you and I that the problem with you and I is that all these pleasures, it could be drugs, it could be gambling, it could be sex, it could be money, it could be fame, it could be sports. All of this is going to diminish in your life and my life. So he's saying, why take that dead-end street? And he's telling you and I that even when you think it's going to be good, even when you think it's going to give you the maximum amount of pleasure, even when you think it's going to give you the maximum amounts of happiness and joy, you're going to find that it's going to constantly diminish. You know, I'm reminded of a story that I once heard about this kindergarten class. You know, in the kindergarten, after the last day, the kids sort of bring presents to the teachers. And teachers sort of anticipate. So there's one little girl, she handed the teacher her gift, and the teacher, knowing that the girl's father was a florist, said, I bet I can tell you what's in that box. Teacher said, flowers. The little girl said, yes, you're right. Another little boy gave her a box, a gift. She knew that his daddy owned a candy store. So she said, I bet I can tell you what's in that box. She said, candy. The little boy said, you're right. The next gift came from a little boy whose father owned a liquor store. The teacher held it up. It was leaking. She touched it. She took a drop with her finger. She tasted it. She said, it's wine. He said, no, it isn't. She touched it again. She took a drop. She put it on her tongue. She said, it's champagne. He said, no, it isn't. And finally, the teacher gave up. And she said, well, what is it? He said, I thought you wanted a puppy. All I'm trying to illustrate to you is that you're going to always continue to seek pleasure, but you're going to always, if your life is just centered on pleasure, it's going to be a dead-end street. And Solomon is saying to us, don't build your life on seeking intellectual pleasure. Don't build your life on seeking pleasure for pleasure's sake. And he's telling us that's going to always end in a dead-end street, because what you think it is not what it's going to be. And Solomon is telling us is that we can't get caught in material things. Look what he tells us in Ecclesiastes 2, 4, and 8. You see, remember, I'm sharing with you the autobiography of the richest, wealthiest man in the history of the world. And what Solomon is telling you and I, that after all these things, I'm giving you these four things, these four temptations, these four desires, that if you just go down these streets without Jesus Christ being the center of your life, you're going to run into a dead end. And when you run into that dead end, where are you going to go? Look what he tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 4 and 8. He tells us some of us have been beguiled by Hollywood. Some of us just think if we can make it to Hollywood, we'll be okay. Some of us have been beguiled by Wall Street. If I could just become an international broker on Wall Street, I'll be okay. Look what he tells us about projects and possessions. You see, some of our lives are driven by projects and possessions. Look what Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 4 and 8. Let's unpack this verse. He said, I undertook great projects. Now, we all about projects. All of us love a project. Deacon Charles love a project, a program. That's what he grew up with. But Solomon says, I understood great projects. Watch this. I built houses for myself. He uses one word in here consistently. I built houses for myself, and I planted vineyards. Watch this. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. Understand what he's saying there? He had this beautiful manicured set of garden. He had peach trees, plum trees, apple trees, coconut trees, pineapple trees. He had all kinds of plants and gardens, projects. I made reserves to water the groves of the firs and trees. Now watch this. I brought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and more flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of the kings in the provinces. Solomon says, I invested my time in projects. I invested my time in possessions. And Solomon, look what he said, keeps saying, I did this for my sake. And Solomon's telling you and I poured everything into my projects to produce my possessions because it all was about me and all was for me. So I spent all my time, all of my energy building what I thought I wanted. You see, we spend a lifetime, we spend all of our energies, all of our efforts trying to build something that we think we want. And Solomon said, be careful that you don't spend a lifetime building something that you think you want, building something that you perceive you want, and find out in the end it's only dog urine. And become so disappointed and so dismayed. So it's telling you and I, look, hey man, I did all the agricultural things I wanted to do. I did all the horticultural things I wanted to do. I did all the landscaping I wanted to do. As a matter of fact, I had 40,000 horses. I had thrones of ivory, gold, and silver. I had all this. And if you really look at Solomon's life, Solomon today would have a net income of over $500 million coming in. That's right. A net income of over $500 million coming in. He would be worth, if you calculate in the day's dollars, $80 billion. He would be worth almost $1 trillion. He had net income. Net income means after all of your expenses, all your obligations, this is what you take in. Over $500 million. Solomon said, I spent all my time doing that. I spent all my time gathering things. And I went to all sorts of measures to get those things. And he tells us that it didn't matter. Because they'll still avoid. So he's telling us, don't build your life around projects and possessions. Because when you build your life around projects and possessions just for what you want, and there's nothing about God in it, you're going to find yourself on a dead-end street. Look what he tells us in Ecclesiastes 5 and 10. And this is a slight. He's telling us is that I want you to know better. I want you to understand better. He says, he who loves money, watch this. They got people who love money. They love money. Money is the God of their life. They'll give up their time. They'll give up their talent. They'll give up their relationships for money. And then they wake up and they find that money will never satisfy you. Because the thing that you thought you could buy with money will never satisfy you. Look what he says. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. Nor he who loves abundance with his income. This too is vanity. He said when you make money the most important things in your life because of what you want to buy, and you spend all your time and all your resources focusing on money, you're going to find that there's no happiness there, that there's no joy there, that there's no peace. Because you know what happens when you get it? One or two things are going to happen. You're going to take all your time spending it, or you're going to take all your time trying to figure out how to keep it. That's a miserable life. Because you can't buy happiness in things. And he's telling you and I that the richer you get in things, that the richer you get in money, the poorer you are. Because if he tells us is that if he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, this is a man who was worth almost $1 trillion in today's dollars. There ain't nobody in this world worth almost $1 trillion today. Solomon in his time and his assets calculated today is worth almost $1 trillion. Solomon in his time and his net income is worth net $500 million a year. That's more than the largest corporation in the world has. So Solomon is telling you and I in his journal, in his diary, in Ecclesiastes 5 and 10, you can love money if you want, but you're never going to be satisfied with money. He said, I built all these palaces. I got all of these fruits and vegetable trees. I got these magnificent gardens. I spent my life looking for abundance and I'm still not happy. He's saying you and I that it has to be more to it. He's saying don't go down this dead-end street. Don't go down a street that has the absence of God as the most significant thing in your life. Solomon found out that material possessions, the desire to accumulate material possessions and things in the absence of God being the head of your life, is a dead-end street. So he's dealt with intellectual pursuit. He's dealt with the pure pursuit of pleasure. He's dealt with projects and possessions. Now he's going to hit you with this fourth thing that all of us deal with. He says to us, sexual thirst is nothing but a dead-end street. If all your life is centered around sexual gratification, eventually that's going to be a dead-end street. Look what he says to us. Some of you guys remember Hugh Hefner? Guy with Playboy magazine. We were always amazed at the Playboy mansion. Hugh Hefner always had 20, 30 women at the Playboy mansion. Man, they had a good time. They hung out. They had all kind of activity went on there. I mean, if you wanted it, you could get it at the Playboy mansion. If you wanted it, you could get it at the Playboy mansion. But I want you to see that compared to Solomon, Hugh Hefner was like my little grandbaby over there getting some milk sleeping right now. Compared to Solomon, Hugh Hefner was an 8-week-old baby. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Look what Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes 2:8. Now I want you to look at this from a different perspective, because we always look at it one way, especially Brother Benny. He looks at it like this. He quotes this to me all the time. Whenever I'm talking to him, he hit me with this Solomon stuff. But I'm going to let him see it from a different perspective this morning. Ecclesiastes 2:8. Look what Solomon says. I want you to see how he made Hugh Hefner look like an 8-week-old baby. You thought the Playboy Bunny Mansion was something? You should have saw what happened in Solomon's palace. Let me just break it down for you so you can see it this morning. Look what he tells us in 2:8. He said, I hired wonderful singers. Oh, by the way, I didn't discriminate. I hired both, I added that now, both men and women. I had many beautiful concubines. I had everything that a man could desire. That's what Solomon tells us in 2:8. Now we're going to unpack that a little bit. I'll say it again. He tells us, I hired wonderful singers. You see, the OJs, Beyonce, and the people that had nothing. Stuff ain't new. Solomon says, I had somebody that made Beyonce look like a little kid. Look at the word he used. He didn't say I hired a singer. He said, I hired wonderful singers. When something is wonderful, what does that tell you? It's magnificent. It's beyond what you normally see. And he said, I can discriminate. LeVar Burton, that's what he always talked to me about, our deacon. Guy should be with the OJs. LeVar Burton, that's his name? What's his name? Mr. John. Anyway, I hired both men and women. He said I hired both men and women, so I had men and women singers. And he said in addition to that, I had many, Solomon Birth, thank you, Brother Jones. I had many beautiful concubines. And then he said, I had everything, I'm past that now. I had everything a man could desire. So I'm like Jesse Owens. Okay. I had everything a man could desire. So Solomon said, I had everything I wanted. Now let me just show you how he's telling us he thought he had everything he wanted. Look what he says to us in 1 Kings, then I'm going to get back to Ecclesiastes 2. He said, Brother Benny loved to quote this, I had 700 wives. That's what they always tell me. I had 700 wives and princesses. He loved to tell me that all the time. And I had 300 concubines. So Solomon says to you and I, hey, the little 30, 40 people you saw at the Playboy penthouse, that ain't nothing. He says, look, those people were temporary. He said, I had 1,000 of them in my Playboy mansion every night. So Hugh Hefner with his 50 at the Playboy Bunny Ranch, that ain't nothing. Solomon says, I had 1,000 wives and princesses and concubines at my disposal every night of the day, 365 days a year. Now back to Ecclesiastes 2 and 9, Brother Buddy. He said, I had 1,000 women. I had everything a man could desire. That's what Solomon's telling us. Ecclesiastes 2 and 9. Listen to this very carefully. Then I became great and increased more than all who had preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood before me. All, watch this, all that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. What Solomon says to you and I, whatever I saw, whatever I wanted, I took it. Whatever I saw, whatever I desired, I took it. He's telling you and I, and as a matter of fact, I felt entitled to it because of all my labor under the sun. Look what he goes on to tell us. Thus I considered all my activities which my hand had done, and the labor which I have exalted 2 and 11, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Solomon is telling you and I, after I did everything I wanted to do with my 1,000 concubines, wives, and princesses, after I threw all kind of party, after we had all kind of orgies, after we did all these things under the sun, after we made, he would have to look like a 8-week-old baby. I came to the realization that that was a dead-end street, and it wasn't going to take me anywhere. Do you get that? He tells you and I that you're not, listen to what I'm saying, and don't take this the wrong way, you're not going to find peace, harmony, tranquility in sex. Now, there's nothing wrong with intimacy between a husband and a wife. God created man and woman to be harmonious, to satisfy one another. But Solomon is saying to you and I that when that becomes your sole pursuit in the absence of relationship with Jesus Christ, and why does he say that? When you have that relationship with Jesus Christ, you're going to honor that woman. You're going to honor that man. You're going to respect that woman. You're going to respect that man. There's going to be a mutual engagement. And Solomon's saying, after all this, it's all still vanity. He's saying, after all this, I couldn't get no satisfaction. Out of 1,000 women, wives and princesses and concubines, after turning my palace into the greatest playboy ranch in the history of mankind, can you imagine what went on in that palace with 1,000 women? Just only dedicated to Solomon and what he chose to do and when he chose to do it. He said he didn't, anything he wanted, he dealt with it. But he comes back and tells you and I, there was no satisfaction in it at all. He tells you and I that in the absence of Jesus Christ being the head of our lives, we can seek as much knowledge and wisdom as we choose. We can seek as much knowledge and wisdom as we choose. He said in the absence of Jesus Christ being the head of our lives, we can seek as much pleasure as we choose. He's saying to you and I in his journal, if our life is just centered around pleasure, for pleasure's sake, that's going to be a dead end road. He's saying to you and I, if our lives are just centered around projects, listen to what I'm saying, because a lot of us get caught in projects. If our lives are only centered around projects and possessions, without Jesus Christ being the center of our lives, that's a dead-end street. You know how Solomon can say that? Because when Jesus Christ is not the center of your life, when Jesus Christ is not your focus, when Jesus Christ is not your direction, you're going to lean onto your own understanding. And as you lean to your own understanding, you're going to find you're going to run into a dead-end street. And Solomon is saying to you and I, when Jesus Christ is the head of your life, when you're dealing with God's playbook, and you understand God's plan and purpose for your life, you're going to find that when you seek intellectual knowledge and wisdom, it's going to be graced by the power of the Holy Spirit. And so that knowledge and wisdom now becomes a tool that you can use to make yourself better and glorify God. In the absence of that, it's a dead-end street. What Solomon's telling you and I, when Jesus Christ is the head of your life, when you're doing a project, and that project glorifies God and makes you better, you're going to excel at it. What Solomon is telling you and I, when you're seeking possessions, and Jesus Christ is the head of your life, because you know without Jesus Christ, those possessions don't mean nothing. You're going to be willing to use those possessions to glorify God and make you a better human being. What Solomon is telling you and I, when you want to have an intimate relationship with God, and you want to have an intimate relationship with another human being, you're going to do it God's way. And you're going to glorify God. And you're going to make yourself a better person. He's saying, all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge God gives to me, I'm sharing it with you. I'm sharing it with you because I don't want you to go down a dead-end street. He's saying to you and I don't want you to do what I did. I forsake my relationship with Jesus and I went down all these dead-end streets. And every time I went down one of them, it was a dead-end street. And he's saying to you and I, life has to be more than just dust in the wind. But when you're climbing up the wrong ladder, and the ladder is on the wrong fence, when you get over that fence, you're going to find that it's puppy urine. And you're going to ask yourself, was it worth it? And have I been grafting at dust in the wind? Do you receive that message?
Yes.
Do you receive that message? Book of Ecclesiastes is a little of a book of life. I know I normally get a little better applause than that, but that's okay. Because sometimes that shock treatment works. Sometimes that shock treatment works. And sometimes God wants us to have things that's going to help us to get where we need to be. Let us all stand. Father, we ask that everyone here today who has not made you their Lord and Savior,
Yes, Lord.
who has not professed it with their mouth and believed it in their heart, Father, that now is the opportunity for them. Now is the opportunity for them, Father, to take the invitation that you extended 2,000 years ago. An invitation of salvation, Father. An invitation that provides grace and mercy.